Come on in. Come on in. Let's get the conversation started. We are going to discuss tonight the top 10 legal questions that I've been getting about Candace Owens, Brigitte Macron, and the defamation law. Okay, so let's get back to this first question of whether Candace's belief that what she was saying is true is going to be enough. And I was saying that, the plaintiffs are still going to have to prove actual malice, but her belief that what she was saying is not going to be a sufficient defense for her. Her state of mind, her diligence in verifying the claims, all of that is going to be relevant. And we already know that the Macrons sent Candace this 100-page letter saying, here's all the evidence you need. They addressed all the questions, allegedly. We haven't seen the letter, but they addressed her questions, her doubts. And based on that, they are going to argue that she had enough information to know that what she was saying was likely to be false, and that it was highly probable that it was false. And also the fact that she was making these statements when the Macrons had won a lawsuit against Natasha Ray and the other, the medium in France, that was also more evidence that what she was saying was probably false. So all of those things are going to help the Macrons. Hey, Cowgirl Cree, hadn't seen you in a while. So that's one of the questions. And I'm looking at some of the comments here that people have over here. So, there's some people, somebody is saying her defense is going to be that she literally 1000% believes it. And I'm sure that's going to be one of her defenses, but even that subjective belief and the subjective standard that's going to be applied, she's going to have to show that, or the Macrons would have to show that there's some evidence that she probably knew that what she was saying was false. And remember with Alex Jones in his case, how it came out that in the background, internally, he knew, he was, basically he knew what he was saying was false. And the plaintiffs were able to bring out that evidence that he knew what he was saying was false. Somebody is asking, how likely will it be that she'll be able to change the venue from Delaware to Tennessee? And we're going to talk about that because that is a great question. And that is a question that's going to play out at the beginning of these claims, where this lawsuit is going to take place. So, of course, the plaintiffs had the opportunity to choose their venue, and they wanted Delaware, Tennessee. For the plaintiff, I'm sure they thought Delaware was a better venue. The judges in Delaware are very familiar with handling cases involving corporations and lots of big issues because Delaware is a state where a lot of companies incorporate, so there's a lot of lawsuits there. And Tennessee might appear to Candace to be a more favorable venue because it's more conservative. But I will say, even with that, with this case being in if Candace tries to remove the case to Tennessee, and let's say she's successful, she's able to remove it to the state of Tennessee. The Macrons can then remove the case from, if she tries to take it to Tennessee state court, they can remove the case to federal court in Tennessee. Federal court judges are, in my experience, just naturally more conservative. Having the case in federal court would give the plaintiffs more of an even playing field, because you're going to have judges who are very experienced. You're going to have judges who are more no nonsense. And so even in Tennessee, the plaintiffs would have a slight advantage, I think, if it's in federal court. But that is a possibility, but I don't think she's going to be able to remove the case to Tennessee, because she does have a company that is incorporated in Delaware. She does have two companies incorporated in Delaware. So I don't think she's going to have a good argument for why the case should be in Tennessee when she voluntarily incorporated those companies in the state of Delaware. But that's going to be a very interesting legal argument that they're going to make, and we'll know pretty quickly how that's going to go. There's another question. Somebody was asking about damages. What type of damages could they recover from Candace? And also, what type of money does Candace have? Somebody is asking, will Candace have to disclose her net worth and assets? And at what stage, would that come in? And so in the complaint, the Macrons asked for awarding the Macrons' actual and presumed damages to be specifically determined at trial, awarding the Macrons' punitive and exemplary damages, awarding the Macrons all costs, disbursements, fees, and interest as authorized by law, and any other remedies as the court may deem just and proper. So they didn't put a dollar amount. Used a lot of times you will see, we want $10 billion, like Donald Trump. He's suing the Wall Street Journal and he's suing them for $10 billion. Well, the Macrons did not put a dollar amount. But if a jury was to find in their favor, they should be able to establish that their reputations have been substantially harmed, and they have suffered humiliation, emotional distress, all of those things. So it would be up to the enlightened conscience of a jury to decide how much money they should get. Okay, you guys, y'all are in real life jurors, IRL jurors. What would you award if you were on the jury? How much do you think the Macrons should get if you were a member of the jury? Put your number in the comments. Drop the amount that you believe they should be awarded. If you think Candace should win, then you can say zero. You can say nothing. But if you think the Macrons should win, what is the amounts you believe they should be awarded in damages, monetary damages? Because remember, in the American civil system, the only thing they can get is money. That's all they can get. It is a money system. So how much do you think they should receive? And how much do you think they should receive in punitive damages if you think Candace should be found liable for defamation? So we have the regular damages, we have punitive damages. Hello, Completely Lawless. How are you? It's good to see you over here. It's good to be over here. So, my TikTok friend, Completely Lawless, he's asking, will Candace have to disclose her net worth and assets? And what stage of case does that happen? So, usually in the discovery process, you will be asking the defendant about their assets. There is a post discovery process where you can also get additional information. And just look at what happened with Alex Jones. I mean, I think what happened with him is probably a good roadmap for what could potentially happen here. So there has been a lot of litigation since they received the judgment against him. He's tried to file for bankruptcy. He's been accused of hiding assets. Just recently, I think a judge determined that he was improperly trying to transfer assets. So the courts can look back at what she's done with her company and with her assets since this lawsuit has been filed to make sure she's not improperly trying to conceal assets, get rid of assets, all of those things. So, but let's see. So somebody says, come on, Completely Lawless, 1,000 francs, that's it? They don't even, there's no such thing as francs anymore. That's basically zero. That sounds like a small amount, but sometimes jurors will say, just give a minimal amount as a statement. Remember Taylor Swift? She only wasn't she awarded like $1 in her lawsuit because it wasn't about the money for her; it was about the principle. Somebody says 20 million. Oh, Cat says 500 million. 500 million. We have 100 million. Okay, these are some big numbers. These are some very big numbers. Deja says at least 50 million. I see a couple of people saying W says at least 50 million also. Somebody says between PJL says between 5 and 10 million. So we're talking about millions of dollars. Now, of course, I see some zeros. Phoenix says 0. Mark Jude says 100 million, make her broke for life. We have 30 million. We have 20 million. Somebody says give Candace 3 million. So this is really interesting, these amounts, because in high profile cases like this, very often, we know it happened in the Diddy case, the parties will have jury consultants, they will have focus groups so that they can figure out what people will actually award or how they feel about the issues in the case. And so that could very well happen in this case. And you all are giving us some good feedback. You all are a great focus group. I see 10 million for each. Lex Defender says 10 and 10 for each one of them. So we're talking big bucks that Candace could potentially be out of. Maybe Candace has insurance. Maybe she has some type of legal insurance that would, or the companies have insurance that would cover these damages. So, how many subscribers plus viewers have seen the video may be sufficient enough in monetary amount. So we're talking about Candace facing some significant personal monetary consequences as well as her businesses. I mean, look at what happened with Cardi B. Cardi B had a lawsuit against a social media personality. She sued, she won, and that person, I've seen her talk about the fact that, Cardi B has all her money. These lawsuits can bankrupt people. Yeah. So Deja is talking about the lawsuit with Megan. So these are, these are some serious issues. So the damages can be quite significant. And I see some people in the comments who don't believe these allegations. They're saying that what Candace did was vile. That would go to the punitive damages. So in addition to the damages that they may say they suffered to their reputations and the emotional stress and those type of things, they could also show, if they can prove punitive damages, that could be far in excess of their personal damages, their actual damages. Those punitive damages are meant to punish. They are meant to punish people who have done bad things so that they don't do it again and that other people don't do it again. Cat is saying even the excess layers of insurance have a self-retention limit or exclusions and might work hard not to pay. Oh yeah, that's very true. In a lot of insurance policies, they have now the insurance companies are out for themselves. Oh, I saw somebody sent me a gift. Thank you very much, Walter. I appreciate that heart that you sent. I deal with insurance companies on a daily basis. So I'm a lawyer who handles personal injury cases, and we see insurance policies, which are contracts. They're just a contract between you and your insurance company. But we see a lot in business policies where they have that exclusions of coverage for things where you have engaged in some personal harm. We see all kinds of exclusions. So it really depends on the type of policy that she has as to whether or not they're going to cover it. And insurance companies, it's not for an unlimited amount. So the policy is going to state, it's for $1 million or it's for $50 million, whatever it is, for some specific amount. And the insurance company, is technically not on the hook if there's a verdict in excess of what the policy covers. And the other thing with insurance companies, if there are insurance policies, the insurance companies control the lawsuits. In our cases, when there's an insurance policy, and that's almost 100% of the cases, we don't talk, the defendant in the case is not making decisions about how to resolve the case. The insurance company is making that decision 100%. A lot of times the defendants don't even know that the insurance company has resolved the case. I remember we had one case where the defendant, we resolved the case with the insurance company, with the adjuster, and the defendant filed a motion with the judge complaining that the insurance company had resolved the case with us. And the insurance company, it was their money, so they control how those cases are resolved. James Eldridge is saying that sometimes people hate in others what they dislike about themselves. That could be very true. I mean, the psychology behind why she's making these claims, I don't understand at all. Batman 66 says, breaking news, Candace just settled for $2 million. We know that's not true, not yet. Deja says, I'd like to know if you think it was smart for them to decide on a jury rather than a judge. Absolutely. Absolutely. Judges don't act with emotion. Judges act based on the law. And so jurors, you can play on their emotion. And so if I had in 99% of the cases, if I have a choice between a judge and a jury, I'm going to choose a jury. Now, there are some times when maybe a judge would be better, but those cases are rare. And at this stage, they would definitely want to ask for a jury because for the defense, the jury is a wild card. What the jurors are going to do, how they're going to view the case, that's a huge wild card. And that is one of the things that sometimes the insurance companies, if there's an insurance policy and they have to pay out, that's what they're concerned about. You know, they can have a jury who says, we're going to award the Macrons $50 billion. A judge is very unlikely to come to that type of decision. So asking for a jury, definitely good move. Thank you all for sharing the live. Thank you for the taps. Thank you for the gifts. Thank you. And if you don't follow me, please give me a follow on both platforms. Over on YouTube, if you don't follow me, please subscribe. And over on TikTok, if you don't follow me, please give me a follow. Okay, so what are some of the other questions that I have been hearing and that you all have? So we've talked about damages. We talked about whether Candace's belief that what she's saying is true is going to be enough. Here's a question. Here's a good question that I've heard. Can Candace countersue, bring a counterclaim against Brigitte and Emmanuel Macron for defamation or harassment or any, does she have any potential claims? And I don't know that I have heard that they have made statements about her. Have y'all heard that they've made statements about her? Now, in her series, she does claim that she had concerns about her safety. But have they said anything about her where she could sue them for defamation? I haven't heard anything like that. Yes, maybe L says the Macrons lawsuit is 218 pages. Yes. Deja, they made a few errors in the lawsuit, such as her being a dual citizen, which she's not. Now, mistakes in the lawsuit are not going to give them a basis, it's not going to give Candace a basis to sue them. So there is, going back to Baldoni and Blake Lively, that lawsuit, I think some of the things that he was claiming involved a legal filing that Blake Lively had made and that the New York Times was reporting on. So typically, what you say in the lawsuit is not going to be a basis for you to bring a defamation claim. So, and I don't know, I don't think I've heard of any other statements that they've made about her. Why would you ever prefer a bench trial? Having 12 seems much better than just one. Yeah, definitely. Now, there have been, let me see, cases where I have personally wanted. Okay, so I actually have a case right now where I think my client would be better off having a trial before a judge, having a bench trial instead of a jury, because sometimes, let me see how to say this. Sometimes if your client is not going to be able to connect with jurors, or that your client may be someone whose personality might be a little off-putting, a judge can see beyond that, and a judge can be more objective, especially in cases where the facts, the law, they're kind of on your side, but the jurors want to give money to people they like. They want to have they need an incentive to act. They need to be motivated. And so in a case like that, I might want a bench trial versus a juror. So I'm trying to think of any other claims that Candace might have against the Macrons. I mean, of course, I don't know all the facts. I don't know what, if anything, they have said about her outside of the lawsuit. But if there is something, I'm sure her attorneys can come up with some type of claims, because for her, that might, it might help her, go on not just defense, but put them on offense also. So David asks, is Candace getting sued? Yes, she's being sued personally, as well as her businesses are being sued. So yes, she is being sued personally. Okay, one of the other big questions that I have heard people asking is, how is discovery going to be handled in this case? Now, just because the president of France is involved in this case, it does not mean they are going to get a pass when it comes to discovery, those types of things. That's unlikely to happen. So they are going to be subject to the same type of discovery standards as any other plaintiff. And that means Candace will have an opportunity to ask them questions, interrogatories, which are written questions, admissions, which are statements that they have to either admit or deny, production of documents. Candace keeps talking about there are no pictures of the Macrons with Emmanuel Macron with his parents when he was a child. She can ask for that in discovery. She can ask for pictures. She can ask for medical exams. A judge is going to have to decide whether or not that is a reasonable thing for her to ask for in this case. But she can do a lot. So the Macrons are going to be subjected to discovery. They may find it very uncomfortable. They may find it very uncomfortable. Ann Rogers is asking, will Candace's attorneys write a response prior to court? Her attorneys have about 30 days from the time the lawsuit was served, meaning they actually received it. And I did go to the court docket just to see what was on the docket. And when I went there, we found out about the lawsuit. I think it was like July 24th, around that time, but it looked like the lawsuit had actually been filed like the day before. And that service, I did see that the companies had already been served. So they have about 30 days from the date the lawsuits were filed to file an answer. And in their answer, they have to respond to each and every one of the claims in the lawsuit. So I'm looking at the lawsuit. There are 634 separate paragraphs in this lawsuit. For each of those 634 paragraphs, Candace has to say, I admit, I deny, or I don't have sufficient information. And she can state all of her affirmative defenses. So whatever those defenses are, she can state them in her lawsuit. So once she files her answer, we'll have a lot more information about where this lawsuit is going. I know she has said she's not going to try to have it dismissed, but if she's going to try to have it dismissed, she will do that at the beginning of this case. She can file a motion to dismiss because the lawsuit fails to assert a claim. That's something that happens very often. She can also file her motion to change venue. That can happen right up front. Those are the type of things we'll see up front. But yes, Candace will have an opportunity to respond up front pretty quickly. Okay, so another question that's in the comments, and I also had on my list of questions, has to do with whether Candace can be held responsible for what other people were saying. And so Kat is asking, could her lawyers argue that the existing rumors about Brigitte make her defamation proof? So that's an interesting question. And the answer is no. In my opinion, it's no. So if she intentionally published or republished defamatory statements, then she can be liable. So her liability can extend to her republishing information that she knew, or she had a reckless disregard for the truth. So she either knew it was false or she recklessly disregarded the truth. So I know in her series, she talks a lot about Xavier Poussard and how Xavier Poussard wrote this book and that she was repeating his claims. So I have two things to say about that. Number one, when I watched the Xavier Poussard interview, Candace said things beyond what I heard him say. She made some statements that seemed to go beyond what he was saying. So that's one. Number two, Poussard at least the Macrons will probably argue that Poussard had already been discredited as somebody whose information could be relied upon. So, and then also Natasha Ray. We saw specifically in the series where Candace did not make some of the claims that Natasha Ray that she was making. But she's not going to be able to hide behind the fact that she was just repeating rumors. Because if you watch her series in, I think, episode 1, Candace says, "I believe she is a man." So that was beyond what the rumors were. So sometimes people will try to hide behind, oh, they're just reporting what other people said, but she's not going to be able to do that here. That's not going to work. Somebody is asking, has Candace been demonetized on YouTube? I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to know if somebody is monetized or demonetized. Quincy Hodges is asking, is this an international case? We have international players, but it is actually a case that has been filed in the United States. So no, it's not an international case really, because the Macrons have agreed to jurisdiction in the United States. They've also, so they've subjected themselves to the US law. So at this point, no, it's not an international case, but of course the people involved are international figures. Somebody is saying they are public figures, so they can't win. So let's talk about that. They're public figures, so they can't win. That is certainly not true. There are people who are public figures who win defamation cases, these types of cases, but they are hard to win. The law is definitely on Candace's side. The law definitely favors Candace because the Macrons have to meet a very, 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 very high standard to prove their claim of actual malice. And it will become somewhat subjective in this case because it's probably going to boil down to whether Candace believed what she was saying was true, whether she ignored evidence that it was not true. That's where the reckless disregard for truth come in. Whether she had this high degree of awareness that what she was saying was false. So all of those things are going to come into play. And it may be an issue where it becomes a jury issue. So a judge is probably going to not be able to decide whether Candace had this sincere belief and sincere and belief that what she was saying was true. So that means it would come down to a jury making that decision. That means jurisdiction is going to matter a lot. So who do you want making that decision if you're Candace? Do you want a Delaware jury making that decision? Or do you want a Tennessee jury making that decision? If you're the Macrons, do you want a Tennessee jury deciding that, or do you want a Delaware jury? What do y'all think? What jury, if you're Candace, let's just deal with Candace, who do you want making that decision? That Delaware jury or that Tennessee jury? And Blessed says proving malice is going to be a no-brainer. I disagree with that, Blessed, because it's not malice in the normal sense that we think of. Actual malice in the legal sense for these cases is a very high standard. You got to show that she knew she was lying. She knew what she was saying was not true, no matter whether she says, I believed it. So people are saying, if you're Candace, Tennessee, yes, not Delaware. Candace said on Tucker Carlson that she wanted it in Tennessee. She actually said that during the series in one of the videos that I saw, and maybe I think it was in the series. She said something about if she wants to, come sue me in Tennessee. I've seen her say that also. So yes, of course she wants her Tennessee jury to decide this issue. And she may not be able to do that. That may not be an option, but that's for that issue of actual malice and whether whether she entertained serious doubts as to the truth of what she was saying. And remember, we haven't gotten into any discovery. And who knows what we're going to find out once discovery starts. Remember Alex Jones? We found out all kinds of stuff that he knew what he was saying about Sandy Hook was false. So who knows what, once you, lift the hood, what you're going to find. So that is a good question. I'm looking at some of the other questions I've been seeing asked about this. Okay, so can Candace claim it's true until proof is offered it's not true? Is there any burden on the Macrons? The burden is all on the Macrons. So technically Candace doesn't have to prove anything. Candace can go to court, let the Macrons present their case. She doesn't have to put up any witnesses. She doesn't have to put up any evidence. But practically, that's not going to work. So we always hear in cases, oh, the defendant doesn't have to present any evidence. And, some people were saying in the Diddy case, he didn't present any evidence. He didn't present a lot of evidence, but he did have a robust defense to the witnesses who testified. So at the very least, Candace is going to have some type of robust defense. She's going to oppose the witnesses and whatever the Macrons put up in the case. But although she does not technically have a burden to prove anything, in these cases where you have to show actual malice, she will have to show that her belief was she's gonna have. So I mean, technically, the Macrons have to show that she had a degree of awareness, a high degree of awareness of the probable falsity of her claims. But in these cases, I find that it just becomes impossible for jurors to not want to hear from the defense. They want the defense to put up a fight to, tell them why they shouldn't believe the evidence that the plaintiffs are putting up is true. So someone also asked this, and this is a great question. So this is another question that I've seen a lot. And it is, if it's determined that Brigitte is biologically a man, does that automatically exonerate Candace Owens? So if Candace is able to show that what she said is true, then yes, truth is a complete defense in defamation cases. So if we learn that Brigitte Owens is in fact a biological man, then Candace wins because what she said was true. So that kind of indicates how much belief the Macrons have in their case. Of course, they know that if Candace can prove that she is a biological man, that Candace wins. So do y'all think they would have brought this case if they are not able to prove that Brigitte Macron is female, is biologically female? Who thinks they still would have brought this case? And as Blessed mentioned, that's not the only claim of defamation that they make in the complaint. They claim she said she stole people's identity. I mean, they have based on each and every episode. So she had 6 episodes. They have claims from each and every episode of defamation. So it's more than that one claim, but that's the big claim. If Candace was able to prove that Brigitte Macron is a man, she's going to win, because at that point we're all going to say, if that's true, then what the hell is going on? Why are we here? So that just tells you a lot about how the Macrons see their case, the strength of what they believe their case is. Annie, can Candace's belief be based on her lacking mental capacity? How does that come into play? No, this is a civil case, not a criminal case. So in a civil case, it's going to come down to whether she recklessly had a belief that this woman was male. So no, what you're asking about is too much. It's more of a for criminal cases. Michael Lawless, too bad we won't have cameras in the courtroom for this one. So is Delaware one of those states where they don't allow cameras in a courtroom? Well, that would be very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. I think having cameras in a courtroom gives people confidence in these decisions, in the outcome. Because when you can see what's actually happened, you can hear it, you can evaluate the evidence for yourself. I think it just gives people more confidence. Somebody's saying, and in no case that the transgender woman had lost have they presented DNA or birth certificate. What do you mean, Nick NG? Are you talking about the cases where Brigitte Macron has already sued people for defamation? Or you're talking about something else? Right. Gigi says they would not have brought the case if they could not prove she was a woman. It wouldn't even make sense. Why would they put her to under the microscope like that? Mr. Honor said, did you know about the signatures? What signatures? Tell me what you're talking about. Leaf flies. Can the court force Brigitte Macron to take a DNA test? I'm going to say possibly. Possibly. So in civil cases, in some civil cases, at least in Georgia, and I'm going to assume the law is somewhat similar in Delaware, sometimes defendants can file motions for independent medical examinations. So that happens in cases where we're alleging there's something about the physical condition of the plaintiff that's important. In this case, I mean, that's the heart of the claims. So I think Candace could make a very legitimate argument that she should be entitled to a DNA test. And the court, could determine who does it, how it's done, what happens with the results, all of those things the court would have control over. But in my opinion, it is not a far-fetched thing for Candace to request. And actually, for the Macrons, it is the easiest way for them to prove their claims. So if I were them, I would have gone into this lawsuit knowing it was a possibility and being willing to do it. In fact, I think I might be at the point where I'm ready to say, let's do it, because it then takes away any arguments about whether there's truth to what she's saying. And then we can talk about actual malice. We can just focus on that. Somebody, Alina, is saying there's more personal information about this case than meets the eye. Okay, like what? Like what? Candace will get a chat introduced into evidence. Yeah, so this whole thing about the DNA test, I think for Candace, it would make sense for her to, of course they're going to ask for it. And for the Macrons, I think it would make sense for them to be willing to do it. But let's just be honest. If their DNA test, is Candace going to accept the results? Will people who believe this true, will they accept the results? Nick NG says she has still lost cases. So the case, against Natasha Ray and the Medium in France. She initially won the cases. The appeals court reversed the cases because they said the women had a good faith belief in what they were saying. Sort of like the standard that Candace is going to have to meet, or I'm sorry, sort of like the standard that the Macrons are going to have to meet, that actual malice. So they did not lose the defamation case. They were able to establish that what the women were saying was false. The reason the defamation case in France was reversed is because the court said they had a good faith belief. Gigi says Candace may not ask for DNA. Are you saying she may not ask for DNA as a um, strategy? She may not ask for DNA. Fourth Power says there was a Brigitte, so of course there's a birth certificate, but it doesn't necessarily follow that the Brigitte Macron of lawsuit is the Brigitte of the birth certificate of 1953. Okay, so some people are saying only DNA will resolve the issue. What do I make of the Trump call? I think Trump was trying to warn or persuade Candace, lay off because these people are about to sue you. So I think he was trying to help her. He was trying to give her a heads up. And I'm sure the Macrons were like, call her, see if you can get her to shut up, to apologize. Gigi is saying yes because she needs only prove that she believes it. Not quite. Not quite. She not only does she have to prove that she believed it, but that also it has to be established that that she didn't act recklessly in ignoring information that would have told her that what she believed was false. So when they sent her that letter in December of 2024, where they allegedly laid out the reasons why what she believed was false, or what she was saying was false, how she reacted to that and what they said is going to be important. Okay, so this is another question I had. Why is this important? Why is Candace pursuing this in the way that she is? Why is this lawsuit important just beyond Candace and Brigitte? And so I was going into the series before I watched the series. I didn't understand why in the world does Candace even care, was the question I kept asking myself. So what I got from the series Becoming Brigitte is that it's more than just about Brigitte Macron. It's about this belief, and I think this is a conservative, right-wing Christian belief that there are PDFs who are running the world. They are making decisions, and they are kind of encroaching on other people's religious beliefs. I think that's the real issue. And so Brigitte Macron, she is kind of caught up in that whole thing. So to me, that's what it's about. Somebody is saying Candace needs to make money. That's what it's about. I am sure that played a big role also because it seems like this has been a big boon for Candace. This has helped her a lot. So the case just started. So Candace might, in fact, be asking for Brigitte Macron to provide DNA. Things are so early in this case. We don't know how things are going to play out. Officially, Candace's team has not said one word about the case. So until they actually file something, we don't know how things are going to go. So someone asked, if you were her lawyer, would you tell her to stop talking or continue since she claims it's what she believes? I would tell her to continue. I mean, you may as well keep talking. It's too late now. Can we create a civilian collective lawsuit against the Trump administration? When a lot of federal employees have asked me that, unfortunately, the answer is no. I wish that were the case. Marnie said, you might catch a case too for your lies. Who's lying? Who's lying? I don't think you can sue a sitting president. The Justice Department, the DOJ, not just the current one, has said that you cannot pursue your claims against a sitting president. So you could file it, but you wouldn't be able to engage in the litigation process. Ann Rogers says, I'd like to know if this affects freedom of speech for any Americans or podcasts. So freedom of speech protects us from the government preventing us from saying what we want. So no, in my opinion, this does not affect freedom of speech. But in these types of cases where it's a politician who's involved, that actual malice standard is there to protect us from having politicians sue us just because they don't like what we said. So the actual malice standard in the cases, it is a protection. So you can, so the government can't stop you from saying anything that you want to say. But if you say something that is false, say something that is defamatory, that speech is not protected. But the protection for the person who's speaking is that if they try to sue you, then they have to prove actual malice. So I don't think this is a freedom of speech issue. Freedom of speech does not give you the ability to say things that are not true. How many days does she have to file a response? She has 30 days from the time the complaint was received. So 30 days from the time it was received. I looked at the court docket. The companies have already received the complaint. At the time I looked at it, Candace had not been personally served. So Mr. Honor says Jean-Michel Tragno is well read in the arts, and his words when he was disguised as Veronique on that show provides a huge clue into his desperation to integrate on a legal level. Okay, so all of that could be proved with DNA also. Whether Jean-Michel Tragno is Bridget's brother. So if the DNA shows that Michel Tragno is Brigitte Macron's brother, that Brigitte Macron and Emmanuel Macron are not kin to each other, that Brigitte Macron is biologically female. Are you going to accept those results? Are you going to accept the results? Yes or no? Or are you still, or are you going to then say, oh no, the results are phony, the lab changed the results? So are you going to accept the results? In France, 23 persons are suing Mrs. Macron. For what? Why are they suing her? Okay, if Brigitte Macron has a DNA test with her 3 biological children and it shows that she is the mother, are you going to accept those results? So how risky is it for content creators who are posting Candaces Owens commentary? If you are reposting it or republishing the information and you're presenting it as true, then that could be a problem. And this is why this is such an interesting question, because the seminal case, the main case in the United States about defamation law is called New York Times versus Sullivan. That's where we came up with the actual malice standard. The conservatives in this country have been trying to do away with the actual malice standard. They have been trying to get the Supreme Court to issue a totally new, different decision on actual malice. I'm going to do a video about that because that is a very fascinating issue. How, in fact, this law firm that is representing the Macrons, they have been involved in trying to do away with the actual malice standard. They want to make it easier for people to sue and win these cases. So, so we're talking about the risk for content creators. So when the Sullivan versus New York Times case was decided, I think it was in the 70s, things have changed so much. We're not talking just about newspapers or news programs or television programs. We're talking about everybody who has a platform on social media who can publish what they want about politicians, about their neighbors, about anyone. And so it feels like the standard should be different. It feels like, the law needs to evolve with what is happening. So there are practical issues. Can you sue everybody on social media who says something about you? So social media platforms they're shielded. The law doesn't allow you to sue YouTube or Google or Meta because they allowed these things to be published. But you can sue a newspaper if they republish it. So at some point, the law is going to, in my opinion, is going to change and is going to have to catch up with the times that we live in. All right, Gigi. So you're getting into a different issue there. Thank you so much, Kat, for subscribing. So, guys, if you don't subscribe, please go ahead and do so. I love talking about legal issues. That's what my social media platforms focus on. So this case, other cases, I love talking about the legal issues. Hi, Grand Duchess, Easy E, nice to see you over here. So that is what I do. That is what I love doing. And I have made a commitment to go live every day for at least 30 minutes a day. where we will talk about legal issues. So I'm trying to get to 100,000 on one of my platforms. I just came over here to YouTube, guys. So YouTube is very new for me, and um, I don't have a lot of subscribers over here. So if you know me from over on TikTok, I have a much bigger platform over there. But please follow me over here on YouTube. I will be going live over here every day for at least 30 minutes until I hit at least 100,000 on my other platform. So, all right, guys, we have been on here for an hour, more than an hour. I'm going to wrap up for this evening. I have enjoyed this time with you. I have enjoyed the conversations that we have had tonight. I am going to watch one of my favorite shows. If there are any Gilded Age fans in here, y'all know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to watch my favorite show at the moment. But I will see you guys tomorrow. So you guys have a great night and keep the questions coming and we'll keep talking about them. Good night.